Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. Barbara Moran, climate and environment correspondent for WBUR. You are back.
I am back. My favorite place.
Oh, man. Thank you. As always, you're here to kind of bring us some bad news, but in your signature style of leaving us with some sort of hope, some sort of gem of positivity. So, Barb, you have a story that's up right now where you went out to Western Massachusetts to talk to some farmers about the flooding that happened last month. And we had a farmer on yesterday, Dave DiLorenzo of Stone Soup Farm in Hadley. And he saw major crop losses due to last month's flood. When you went out to Western Massachusetts, did you hear similar stories from farmers out there?
Yeah, it's been pretty bad this year in Massachusetts. And it wasn't just these floods and all this rain, right? It's been bad the whole year. It started like in February where it was kind of a warm winter, but then there was this sort of surprise frost that killed a lot of the peach blossoms. So there's no peach crop. And then in May, there was a really late frost that killed a bunch of the blueberries. And then in July, all this like rain and flooding. And so it's just been like one thing after another for them.
Damn. So it's just punch after punch.
Yeah. I actually went out to this one farm. This guy was super interesting. His name was David Fisher, this farmer. And he was telling me about the floods and how it came so fast that they were just having their morning meeting. And all of a sudden, they look out and the river is flooding like several feet deep over their field. So this is what he told me.
Chickens were literally getting washed down the river. So, my crew was in there wading chest deep in the water, trying to catch the chickens as they came by. Had a team of horses out here plunging into the water, trying to pull the coop to higher ground. So it was, it's about as like high intensity as you could imagine.
And here's another thing that I find interesting in your story. Only 12% of the food consumed in Massachusetts is grown in state, right? So
surprising.
Majority of the food that gets to Boston comes from outside of the state. But this is still a big deal and people should still care, right?
I mean, it's even more of a big deal, right? Because so little is grown here. And, it's a big deal in two ways. One is because this crazy weather isn't just here. It's happening everywhere in the country where food is grown, right? So that affects us. And also, I think having locally grown food and more of it, we should have more of it, is kind of a climate safety net for us for when these other big disruptions happen, like happened in the beginning of the pandemic and shipping goes down or trucking goes down. We have local food supplies so that people can eat. And it's important for us to keep that going, not just as like a little luxury or whatever, but as, as a safety net for us.
I guess what you're saying is like the idea of getting fresh fruits, like say if you're a member of a CSA or something like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of that's kind of a luxury in a sense. And unfortunately, that's where we are nowadays, right? Where like farm food is a luxury.
Right.
But it's not
in many cases.
Right? When you think about it, this is food grown nearby. And like you said, the safety net is that it is in state.
Yeah. And when we think about like what we want to spend money on for climate change, there's a lot of talk about, seawalls and other things that sort of protect us from the elements or sort of, heat shading. And that's all like super important. Don't get me wrong. But like, I think local food is something we need to think about, and supporting local farmers is something that we as a society and we as New Englanders really need to think about as sort of a climate change adaptation.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right.
You know?
That
Yeah.
makes sense. What did you hear from climate experts as it relates to what the local farmers have been going through? How do they summarize these farmers' experiences?
Yeah. So what's interesting is, so climate change, you think, okay, the world's getting hotter. And so therefore we're going to have more drought and more heat,
Yeah.
which is true sometimes. But I think what's interesting, and I think what a lot of farmers and all of us are grappling with, is it's not just like, okay, it's going to get steadily hotter over time. Like, in a way, you could deal with that. But what's happening with the weather is it's getting weirder. It was warm over the winter,
Yep.
and then we had this freeze and everything froze, and it was like, what?
Yeah.
Right? So I called up this woman, Bernadette Plackey, who's a meteorologist, and she works for this group called Climate Central, which is a nonprofit climate education group. And I asked her, I'm like, what's the deal? Here is what she told me about how the whole system works.
When we add more heat to our Earth system, it shakes things up a lot. It's like a pot of boiling water. When you heat it up, things start to boil and change, right? And that's what we're doing to the Earth's climate system. And it plays out in many different ways.
So I like that image of sort of things like boiling. This volatility, right, is what we're seeing, is like frost at the wrong time and heavier rain than we're used to, and hotter days than we're used to. And, and it's just, it makes it really hard for farmers to plant things.
That's got to be frustrating for farmers too, because you spend so much time perfecting your craft, right?
Yep.
That's difficult enough, right? Having to learn how to use the soil, how to take care of the soil, how to grow the plants, when to grow the plants. And now you throw in a changing climate, and that's got to be just super destabilizing and hella frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what this farmer, one of the farmers I was talking to, was saying, because I'm like, well, what do you do? Like, what are you thinking? And he's like, I'm not sure. Right. And so let's listen to him again. This is David Fisher.
Yeah, I don't know. What is the wise thing and what's the foolish thing to do? I don't know. Just continue to do the same thing when we're getting whacked like this. Seems kind of foolish, but it's not easy or obvious to know what to do.
Yeah. I was like, do you use different plants? Do you change the time that you plant? Do you do this? And he's just like, we're trying to like brainstorm everything, and I heard that from all the farmers I talked to. I think they're all really like puzzling through it.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Did you kill Marlene Johnson?
I think you're one of the first people to have actually asked.
From WBUR and ZSP Media, this is Beyond All Repair, a new podcast about an unsolved murder that will leave you questioning everything.
Somebody should be in jail for murdering my sister.
A woman who's never been believed.
As long as they think I have done this, then they're not looking for who actually did this.
And that's what makes it a cold case.
No, it's a botched case.
And a search for the truth, once and for all.
Wow, it just gets more interesting.
Beyond All Repair. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Be careful. You're digging in a place that's been very peaceful for a while.
Do it anyway. Dig.
And we're back. So are there any farmers in the state, out of the state, who are adapting to these changing climate conditions?
Yeah, absolutely. They're all trying all kinds of different stuff. I talked to one farmer who was having a lot of water in the fields from flooding and rain, and she was using like raised beds to plant vegetables, and that seemed to be working. And another one was planting more raspberries, because I guess those are more tolerant to flooding and heavy rain. And that farmer we talked about earlier, David Fisher, he was thinking like of just leaving some fields unplanted and sort of moving his crops to another field. And there's this one woman I interviewed. Her name's Meredith Wecker, and she grows blueberries. She has a 55-acre low bush blueberry farm out in Heath, Mass. And she was thinking about buying this row cloth. So you buy this cloth and you put it over bushes when it's going to freeze to protect them. And I said to her, I was laughing because I'm like, it sounds like the ground crew at Fenway Park or something. And she's like, yeah, it does kind of sound like that.
We have such an awesome customer base, though. I feel like we could get a group of emergency frost protection. Right. Yeah. And when you think about it, it's like if we had to use it once every 10 years and it saved $200,000 from blueberries from being lost and everyone could still have blueberries, it could be worth it.
So she, it's like everybody was kind of making these calculations. Like, this is the first time I've ever talked to farmers and they're all like, this is different. Yeah. And this is climate change and we need to think differently. Like before you had a hurricane would come through and they're like, this is bad, but it's a, once every 10 year, 20 year thing and we'll just move on. But now it's just like, how do we think about this,
Mm-hmm. It's a real crisis in that field of work. Well, I want to shift the focus to us. We're talking about climate change and how these farmers are having to readjust. Whether you have a CSA or whether you get your food directly from a farm or you get it from the grocery store, what can we do to help the farmers through this tough time as they figure out what to do for the future?
Yeah. Farmers markets are fairly cheap. They're often cheaper than the grocery store, right? And there's a lot of food assistance available for CSAs too. There are a number of CSAs in Massachusetts in the Boston area, which are extremely low cost or even almost free for people who are on food assistance. Like Eastie Farms has one, and there's a few other folks that have them. So I think people should consciously try to look for and buy local food if you have the means in Massachusetts. Also, it's important, if you really care about it, to sort of speak up to your state legislature. The Mass legislature recently made, I think, $20 million available to farmers to help them. Okay. So that's great. And the farmers are super appreciative, and that's going to get a lot of them through this. But when you talk to legislatures, or if you talk to them, to sort of get them to think about farming as part of our climate resilience. The other important thing is just these conversations that we're having, just getting people to start connecting the dots and thinking about it, I think moves us in the right direction.
Well, Barb, thank you so much. As always, it's just an absolute joy talking to you, even though we're always talking about some of the toughest things.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Daryl.
That's WBUR climate and environment correspondent Barbara Moran. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. Please, wherever you listen to podcasts, especially Apple or Spotify, rate and review us. Let people know how you're enjoying the show. It really goes a long way to helping us out, and we truly, truly appreciate it. And if you have any thoughts on this episode, hit us up on Instagram at WBUR The Common, or send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. With that said, I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I will talk to you tomorrow.